My mother leaned over the railing, laughing so hard that strangers turned to stare, while my cousin pointed at my trembling hands and whispered that I was a fraud who didn't belong. I stood there fighting back tears, convinced my humiliation was the final memory I'd take from this campus, until the dean stepped forward, silenced the stadium, and spoke the one sentence that would destroy their lies forever. The heat inside Snapdragon Stadium was suffocating, a thick, heavy blanket that made the air shimmer above the turf, but that wasn't why I was sweating. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to grip the sides of my cheap navy blue graduation gown just to keep them steady. It was secondhand, bought from a girl in the dorms 3 years ago who was a size smaller than me, so the sleeves rode up my forearms and the fabric pulled tight across my shoulders. I kept tugging at the collar, trying to breathe, telling myself that I had made it. I was here. I was standing on the precipice of the rest of my life. I should have been beaming. I should have been taking selfies with a squad of girls, throwing my cap in the air, and planning where we were going for brunch. I was graduating magna cum laude from San Diego State University. I had a GPA that I had bled for, pulling all-nighters after 8-hour shifts at the diner, writing essays on my phone during bus rides, and surviving on instant ramen and sheer spite. I had spent the last half of my senior year couchsurfing because I couldn't afford rent and tuition simultaneously, and I chose tuition every single time. This moment was supposed to be my victory lap. But as I stood there in the sea of black and blue robes, surrounded by thousands of excited students, I felt like an imposter. Fraud. A little girl playing dress-up in a world where she didn't belong. I made the mistake of looking up at the stands. I knew exactly where they were sitting. I had sent them the tickets weeks ago, debating until the very last second whether I should even bother. Part of me, the stupid, hopeful child part of me that still lived in my chest, wanted them to see me. I wanted my mother, Patricia, to look at me and finally see something other than a burden. I wanted her to see a daughter who had defied the odds. I spotted them 3 rows up near the aisle. My mother was wearing a bright yellow dress that clashed violently with the stadium seats. She was leaning toward my aunt, her hand covering her mouth, but her shoulders were shaking. She wasn't crying tears of joy. She was laughing. Beside her sat my older cousin, Brandon. He was slouching, looking at his phone, clearly bored out of his mind. He looked up, scanned the crowd, and locked eyes with me. Even from this distance, the disdain on his face was clear. He nudged my mother and pointed straight at me. I saw his lips move. I didn't need to be a lip reader to know what he said, but the clarity of it hit me like a physical slap. She actually thinks she belongs here. My mother threw her head back and laughed louder. It was a sound I knew well. It was the same laugh she used when I told her I wanted to go to college in the first place, back when I was 17. "Don't be dramatic, Natalie," she had said then. "You'll drop out in a semester like you always quit everything. Save your money and pay me rent instead." She loved that narrative. She loved telling the neighbors, the church ladies, and anyone who would listen that Natalie was the difficult one, the dramatic one, the one who lived in a fantasy world. Meanwhile, my younger brother, who hadn't even applied to college yet, was the golden child. He got the new car. He got the financial help. He got the graduation party for finishing high school, complete with a DJ and catered food, while I got silence and side-eyes for getting into a university. I turned my eyes back to the stage, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The commencement speaker, a successful alumni who had founded a tech startup, was droning on about resilience. "True grit is forged in the fire," he said, his voice booming over the speakers. "It is the ability to stand tall when the world tells you to sit down." The irony tasted like copper in my mouth. Behind me, I heard a familiar voice. My aunt was loud, lacking any self-awareness or perhaps just not caring who heard her. "Watch," she whispered, her voice carrying over the rows of seated graduates. "She's going to trip walking up. Those heels are from Goodwill, I bet." A ripple of snickers moved through the people around them. My face burned hot, my skin prickling with shame. I stared straight ahead, fixing my gaze on the back of the head of the guy in front of me. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I wouldn't trip. I wouldn't falter. But the doubt was creeping in, insidious and cold. Maybe they were right. Look at me. My hair was frizzing in the humidity because I couldn't afford the salon visit to get it pressed properly. My shoes were scuffed. I was tired, bone-deep, soul-crushing tired. I had worked a double shift yesterday just to afford the gas to get here. Maybe I was just pretending. Maybe this degree was just a piece of paper that wouldn't change the fact that my own family viewed me as a joke. The ceremony dragged on. Names were called. Students walked across the stage, cheered on by air horns and screaming families. I watched fathers running down the aisles to snap photos of their daughters. I watched mothers weeping into tissues, beaming with pride. It felt like I was watching a movie in a foreign language, a language of love and support that I had never learned to speak. My row stood up. It was time. Panic flared in my chest. I smoothed the front of my gown again, my palms slick with sweat. I moved into the aisle, the line shuffling forward slowly, step by step, closer to the stage, closer to the moment where I would have to walk across that platform alone, with nothing but my mother's mockery ringing in my ears. I glanced up at them one last time as I neared the ramp. Brandon was filming me now, a smirk plastered on his face, probably getting ready to post whatever embarrassing thing I did to his social media. My mother was checking her watch, looking annoyed that this was taking so long. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the shaking in my legs. Just walk, I told myself. Just get the diploma and keep walking. Don't stop until you're in Seattle. I reached the top of the ramp. I handed my card to the announcer. He looked at it, then looked at me. He didn't read it immediately. He paused. The dean of the university, a tall, imposing man with silver hair and a stern face, stepped up to the microphone, interrupting the flow of names. The rhythm of the ceremony broke. The applause died down, replaced by a confused murmur. Froze. Was there a problem? Did I forget a fee? Was I not graduating? My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought I might pass out right there on the stage. I could practically hear my mother's voice in my head. See? Told you. You messed it up. I looked out at the sea of faces, terrified, waiting for the floor to open up and swallow me whole. I was ready for the final humiliation. I was ready for them to tell me to leave. But then, the dean looked directly at me, his expression softening just a fraction, before he turned to the microphone and spoke. Have you ever achieved something incredible, something you poured your blood, sweat, and tears into, only to have the people who were supposed to love you the most treat it like a joke? Have you ever felt the crushing weight of achieving success while standing completely alone? If you have a family that supports you, go hug them right now because you are lucky. But if you know what it feels like to be the Natalie in your family, if you know what it's like to fight for your dreams while everyone prays for your downfall, you need to smash that like button right now. Subscribe to the channel and comment, "I am resilient," below. Do not let the haters win. Show them that you are still here, you are still fighting, and you are not going anywhere. Let's get justice for Natalie. The silence that followed the dean's interruption was heavy, the kind of silence that usually precedes bad news. I stood frozen at the top of the ramp, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Every insecurity I had buried deep inside clawed its way to the surface. They know, I thought, panic rising in my throat. They know I'm a fraud. They're going to ask me to leave. I braced myself for the humiliation, expecting the dean to announce a clerical error or an unpaid library fine that would strip this moment away from me. Instead, he adjusted the microphone, his voice echoing with a solemn authority that reached every corner of the stadium. Before Natalie Brooks crosses this stage, there's something the university needs to acknowledge. He paused, looking down at a card in his hand. 4 years ago, an anonymous endowment donor established a private scholarship fund intended for a single student. This grant was designed to cover full tuition, emergency housing, and all educational expenses for a recipient demonstrating academic excellence under extreme personal hardship. That recipient is Natalie Brooks. The air left my lungs. The stadium, which had been buzzing with restless energy just moments before, went dead quiet. Scholarship. I had never applied for a private endowment. I had scraped by on Pell Grants, work-study programs, and sheer desperation. This student, the dean continued, his eyes meeting mine, maintained a 3.9 GPA while working 2 jobs and navigating housing insecurity without familial financial support. The camera cut to the jumbotron. I saw my own face, magnified 50 feet high. Eyes wide, lips parted in shock. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. It wasn't the mocking laughter I had feared. It was awe. I instinctively looked toward the stands, needing to see their reaction. My mother's smile was gone. Her face was frozen in a mask of confusion. Beside her, Brandon's mouth had actually fallen open. The hand he had been using to point and laugh was now limp at his side. They weren't looking at a failure anymore. They were looking at someone the university had just publicly crowned a survivor. But the dean wasn't finished. The donor has also requested to be identified today. A movement in the faculty section caught my eye. A woman in full academic regalia stood up. Dr. Rachel Kim, my former professor from community college, the one who had bought me lunch when I was fainting from hunger, the one who had helped me transfer when my parents cut me off at 19. She looked straight at me across the distance and gave a small, firm nod. Tears finally spilled over, hot and fast. I wasn't crying from shame. I was crying because, for the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I crossed the stage in a blur. The applause that followed was thunderous, a stark contrast to the snickering I had heard earlier. Strangers cheered. The faculty clapped. I accepted my diploma, my hands shaking not from fear, but from the adrenaline of vindication. As I stumbled back to my seat, my phone began to vibrate violently in my pocket. It didn't stop. I pulled it out expecting hate mail. Instead, the screen was lit up with texts from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years. Aunt Sarah, we are so proud of you, honey. Always knew you were special. Uncle Mike, let's grab dinner to celebrate. Me. Always. All of it. They were vultures circling a fresh kill, sensing success and money where they had previously only seen a burden. I was about to turn my phone off when a new message popped up, separate from the sudden flood of false affection. It was from my mother. Didn't say congratulations. It didn't say she was proud. It was 3 words that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, hinting that she had interpreted the dean's announcement very differently than everyone else. Where is it? I stared at the screen, the 3 words burning into my retinas. Where is it? My mother didn't care about the honor, the recognition, or the fact that I had just clawed my way out of poverty to achieve something she said was impossible. She had heard the words housing allowance and tuition gaps, and her mind had immediately gone to a calculator. If the school had paid for my life, she was wondering where the rest of the money she assumed I must have been hoarding, had gone. I shoved the phone into my pocket, my hands trembling again, but this time from rage. I didn't wait for the recessional to finish. I grabbed my purse and ducked out of the row, ignoring the confused looks of the graduates around me. I needed to get to my car. I needed to leave before they could sink their claws in. The concourse was a crush of bodies. Happy families hugging and taking photos with bouquets of flowers. I navigated through them like a ghost, keeping my head down, dodging the joy that felt so foreign to me. I made it out of the stadium and into the blinding afternoon sun, heading straight for the concrete parking structure on the north side. I was 20 feet from my beat-up Honda Civic when I heard it. The voice that used to make me flinch as a child. Natalie. Sweetie, wait up. Froze. I considered getting in the car and locking the doors, but they were already there, flanking me like a pack of wolves. My mother, my aunt, and Brandon. Patricia reached me first. The transformation was terrifying. The woman who had been cackling at my expense an hour ago was now beaming, her arms wide open. She went in for a hug, but I took a sharp step back, my back hitting the dusty metal of my car door. She stopped, dropping her arms but keeping that plastic, frightening smile plastered on her face. Oh, don't be like that. We were just cheering for you. We're so proud. Brandon kicked at the gravel, looking everywhere but at me. He looked smaller now. his earlier arrogance deflated by the public revelation that I was valued by people much more important than him. Proud, I repeated, my voice raspy. You were laughing. I saw you. We were laughing with you, honey, my aunt chimed in, her voice dripping with syrup. We were just amazed you pulled it off. My mother waved her hand dismissively. Forget all that. We need to talk about this. This announcement. Her eyes narrowed, the mask slipping just a fraction. Why didn't you tell us about the scholarship, Natalie? Or family? We worry about you. You kicked me out, I said, gripping my keys so hard they bit into my palm. You told me to figure it out myself. So I did. But the dean said it covered housing, she pressed, stepping closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You've been sleeping on couches. So, if they gave you money for housing, you must have saved it, right? That's a lot of money to keep from your mother. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she wasn't seeing a daughter. She was seeing a bank error in her favor. I didn't tell you, I said, my voice steadying, because you never asked. Well, I'm asking now, she snapped, her sweetness evaporating instantly. Because if you have thousands of dollars sitting in an account while I'm struggling to pay bills. She doesn't have the money, Patricia. The voice came from behind them, cool and composed. My mother spun around. Dr. Rachel Kim stood there, still in her academic robes, holding a thick manila envelope. She wasn't smiling. She looked from my mother to me, and then her gaze settled on Patricia with a look of clinical detachment that sent a shiver down my spine. Who are you? My mother demanded, though her voice wavered. Dr. Kim stepped into the circle, closing the distance. I'm the donor, she said softly. And we need to discuss why Natalie never received the federal aid she was entitled to. I think you know the answer, don't you? My mother's face went through a kaleidoscope of expressions in under a second. Confusion, realization, and then a flash of pure, defensive anger. She straightened her posture, clutching her purse like a shield, trying to summon the authority she had wielded over me for my entire childhood. I don't know what you're talking about, Patricia spat, turning her glare on Dr. Kim. This is a family matter. You're just a teacher. You have no right to interfere in our finances. I have every right, Dr. Kim replied, her voice dangerously calm. She tapped the manila envelope against her palm. As the benefactor of the scholarship that kept your daughter off the street, I have a vested interest in why she was destitute in the first place. She chose to leave, my aunt interjected shrilly, stepping up to defend her sister. Natalie walked out. She's stubborn. We offered her a home, and she left because she didn't want to follow the rules. I was 19, I said, my voice cutting through the humid air. And the rules were that I had to pay you 80% of my paycheck for a room with no door, while you bought Brandon a new gaming setup every month. That's rent, Brandon mumbled, though he took a step back when I looked at him. Dr. Kim ignored them and focused solely on my mother. Natalie applied for financial aid 4 years ago. She was denied. Do you know why, Patricia? My mother stayed silent, her jaw tight. She was denied because her expected family contribution was calculated based on your income, Dr. Kim continued. Because you refused to sign the paperwork granting her independent status. But that wasn't the worst part. Even after you kicked her out, even after she was living in her car and sleeping on friends' couches, you filed your taxes claiming her as a dependent resident. The color drained from my mother's face so fast it looked like she might faint. I support her emotionally, my mother stammered, her eyes darting around the parking lot to see if anyone was listening. I'm her mother. The law says you cannot claim a deduction and an education credit for a child you do not support and who does not live with you for more than half the year, Dr. Kim interrupted, her tone sharpening to a razor's edge. You pocketed thousands of dollars in refunds and credits meant to subsidize the education of a student you weren't feeding. You essentially stole her tuition money to fund your lifestyle. I felt a cold numbness spread through my chest. I had suspected it. I had always wondered why the IRS rejected my independent filing attempts, but hearing it out loud was different. She hadn't just neglected me. She had actively profited from my poverty. She had watched me starve while she bought new clothes with the money the government thought she was spending on me. You didn't just hurt her chances, Dr. Kim said, stepping closer. You committed tax fraud. And you did it for 4 consecutive years. My mother let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. Oh please. Who's going to know? Just paperwork. Everyone fudges a little on their taxes. You're being dramatic, just like her. Dr. Kim finally smiled, but it was the coldest thing I had ever seen. She reached into the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper with a government letterhead. That brings us to the second twist of the afternoon, Dr. Kim said softly. You asked why Natalie didn't tell you about the scholarship. It's because when we finalized the audit of her financial status last week, the university was legally obligated to report the discrepancy. This isn't just a conversation in a parking lot, Patricia. She held up the letter. The investigation started 3 days ago. The word investigation hung in the air like smoke, choking the fight right out of my mother. For a moment, the bustling noise of the parking lot, the car doors slamming, the distant cheers of other families, faded into a dull roar. All I could hear was Patricia's ragged breathing. You did this, she whispered, her eyes wide and wet, fixing on me with a look of pure betrayal. You reported your own mother to the federal government. I submitted my paperwork to prove I was independent so I could stay in school, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I just told the truth. You're the one who created the lie. You have to fix it, she demanded, her voice rising in panic. She reached out, grabbing my wrist with a grip that was painful. Natalie, you have to tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I sent you cash. Tell them you lived at home on weekends. If they audit me, they'll garnish everything. The house, the car. The car you bought for Brandon. I asked, yanking my arm out of her grasp. Brandon flinched. He looked from his mother to me, his face pale. Wait, Mom, is this real? Like jail real? Shut up, Brandon, she snapped, not looking at him. Her focus was entirely on me, desperate and manic. Natalie, please. Or family. You can't let them destroy us over a few tax forms. Dr. Kim, surely you understand. It was a misunderstanding. Can pay it back. I just need time. Dr. Kim stepped between us, shielding me. It's out of the university's hands, Patricia. The IRS doesn't do misunderstandings when it involves 4 years of willful fraud. The report has been filed. My aunt, who had been standing silently by the bumper of her SUV, suddenly took a sharp step away from my mother. Her face had gone ashen. Patty, my aunt said, her voice trembling. You used my address on those forms 2 years ago. Remember? You said it was for the school district zoning. My mother froze. She slowly turned to look at her sister. Sarah, don't start. You said it was for zoning. Aunt Sarah screeched, causing a passing group of graduates to turn and stare. Did you use my address to claim her as a resident in my house too? Did you drag me into this? I did what I had to do, my mother yelled back, losing her composure entirely. I'm not going to prison for you. Aunt Sarah fumbled for her purse, pulling out her car keys. I'm calling my husband. I'm checking our returns. If you used our social security numbers, Patricia, I swear to God, I will testify against you myself. Sarah, wait. My mother lunged for her, but my aunt was already scrambling into her car, locking the doors with a loud thunk. I watched the family unit disintegrate in real time. It wasn't love that held them together. It was mutual convenience. And the moment that convenience turned into liability, they scattered like roaches when the lights came on. Let's go, Natalie, Dr. Kim said gently, placing a hand on my shoulder. I turned toward my car, leaving my mother standing alone in the dust, screaming at her sister's retreating taillights. I felt lighter than I had in years. But as I unlocked my door, my mother spun around. Her face twisted into something ugly and desperate. You think you've won, she screamed across the asphalt, her voice cracking. You think you're free. You better check your credit report, Natalie. Because the tax returns weren't the only thing I signed your name on. My hand froze on the door handle of my Honda. The threat hit me with the force of a physical blow. Credit report. My mother stood by the concrete pillar, her chest heaving, a look of vindictive triumph replacing her earlier panic. She knew she had lost the battle over the tax returns, so she had decided to scorch the earth before retreating. "Get in the car, Natalie," Dr. Kim urged, her voice low and urgent. She didn't look at my mother. She was treating her like a volatile chemical that needed to be contained. "Don't engage. That's what she wants." I slid into the driver's seat, my legs feeling like jelly. Dr. Kim hurried around to the passenger side, clutching her manila envelope. I locked the doors the second she was inside, my heart hammering against my ribs. I peeled out of the parking spot, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I didn't breathe until we were out of the structure and merging onto Montezuma Road, putting miles of concrete between me and the woman who gave birth to me. "She's bluffing," I said, though my voice sounded thin and unconvinced. "She has to be bluffing. She couldn't open accounts in my name. She doesn't have my current address." Dr. Kim was silent for a moment, looking out the window. "She has your social security number, Natalie. She has your birth certificate. And up until recently, she had a convincing narrative that you were a dependent living under her roof." She turned to me, her expression grave. "Pull over at the next coffee shop. You need to check. Now." We stopped at a Starbucks a mile from campus. I didn't even buy a drink. I sat at a corner table, downloaded a credit monitoring app, and typed in my information with shaking fingers. The loading circle spun for an agonizing 10 seconds. Then the score popped up. 512. I gasped, a strangled sound that drew a few glances. 512. Oh, I've never had a credit card. I pay cash for everything. I scrolled down to the open account section. The list was a horror show. There were 3 maxed-out store credit cards: Best Buy, Macy's, and a Visa with a $5,000 limit that was currently past due. But those weren't the worst of it. At the bottom of the list was a massive installment loan. Auto Finance Corp. $28,000 remaining balance. Status: 60 days late. "A car," I whispered, turning the phone so Dr. Kim could see. "She bought a car in my name." Dr. Kim adjusted her glasses, leaning in. "The date on the loan origination? That was 8 months ago." The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. 8 months ago. That was when Brandon graduated high school. That was when my mother posted photos on Facebook of the brand new ride she had gifted him for being such a good boy. "It's Brandon's car," I said, the rage building in my gut, hot and sharp. "She bought my cousin a car using my credit, and now she's ruining my financial future because he's not making the payments." "This is identity theft," Dr. Kim said firmly. "We go to the police station next. We file a report, then we contact the bureaus. It will take time, but we can fix this." I stared at the screen. I looked at the make and model listed on the loan details. 2024 silver Toyota Camry. I remembered seeing it in the parking lot. I remembered Brandon leaning against it, smirking at me while I walked toward the stadium. A dark, cold idea began to form in the back of my mind. I looked up at Dr. Kim. "Legally," I said slowly, "whose car is that?" Dr. Kim frowned. Then her eyes widened as she understood where I was going. "Technically, if your name is the only one on the title and the loan, it's your property." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the spare key fob my mother had accidentally dropped in the chaos of the confrontation. Or maybe she hadn't dropped it. Maybe, in her panic to hurt me, she had forgotten that the ownership of a car works both ways. I looked at the tracker on the loan app. It had a GPS locator for asset recovery enabled. "The police can wait an hour," I said, standing up. "I need to go pick up my graduation present." The GPS locator on the loan app led us to an Olive Garden about 10 minutes from the stadium. It was the kind of place my mother considered high class, perfect for a celebration she assumed I was paying for, Or in this case, a crisis meeting to figure out how to keep me from sending her to prison. I pulled my beat-up Honda into the lot, parking 2 rows away from the shiny silver Camry. It sat there gleaming under the afternoon sun, a symbol of everything they had stolen from me. It had leather seats, a sunroof, and custom rims. My brother had been driving around in a $28,000 vehicle financed by my credit score, while I had been taping my side mirror onto my car with duct tape. "Are you sure about this, Natalie?" Dr. Kim asked, her hand hovering over the door handle. "We can just call the police to meet us here. Taking it yourself. It's risky." "It's not taking," I said, my voice hard. "It's repossession. The registration is in my name. The loan is in my name. Legally, I'm just picking up my property." I handed Dr. Kim the keys to my Honda. "Follow me. If they come out, don't engage. Just drive." Dr. Kim hesitated, then nodded, her jaw set. She moved to the driver's seat of my car while I stepped out into the humid air. I walked toward the Camry, my heart thumping against my ribs. I could see the restaurant entrance. Through the glass double doors, I spotted the back of Brandon's head in the waiting area. They were arguing. My mother's hands were flying in the air. They were too distracted to look out the window. I reached the car. I pressed the unlock button on the spare fob I had swiped from the pile of belongings my mother had dropped during the parking lot confrontation. The lights flashed amber. The locks clicked open with a satisfying thunk. I slipped into the driver's seat. The smell hit me instantly. A mix of cheap body spray, fast food wrappers, and stale weed. Smelled like Brandon. I felt a wave of nausea, but I shoved it down. I adjusted the seat, which was reclined way too far back, and pushed the start button. The engine purred to life, smooth and quiet, unlike the rattling cough of my Honda. I threw it into reverse, my eyes glued to the restaurant entrance. No movement. They were still fighting. I backed out, shifted into drive, and peeled out of the lot, Dr. Kim following close behind in my rearview mirror. We drove for 3 miles until we reached a quiet park and ride. I pulled the Camry into a spot and killed the engine. The silence inside the car was deafening. I ran my hands over the leather steering wheel. Felt expensive. Felt stolen. I needed to make sure I had everything. I popped the glove box open, looking for the registration to confirm my ownership in case I got pulled over. I found the registration instantly. Natalie Brooks. There it was, in black and white. But underneath the registration and a stack of unpaid parking tickets, there was a thick, sealed envelope from a company I didn't recognize. Peck's Life and Casualty. Curiosity got the better of me. I tore the envelope open. It wasn't a car insurance policy. It was a life insurance policy. I scanned the document, my breath catching in my throat. The policy was taken out 3 years ago. The insured party was me. The coverage was for $500,000. And the beneficiary, Patricia Brooks. I stared at the paper, my blood turning to ice. But it was the handwritten note clipped to the back of the policy that made the world spin. It was a note from my mother to her insurance agent, dated 2 weeks ago. If the insured passes away from an accidental overdose, is the payout still valid? Please call me ASAP. The air in the Camry felt suddenly thin, as if the oxygen had been sucked out through the sunroof. I read the note again, my brain refusing to process the handwriting. Accidental overdose. I didn't do drugs. I barely drank. The only way I would die of an overdose was if someone forced it into my system. A tap on the window made me jump so hard I dropped the papers. Dr. Kim was standing there, looking concerned. I unlocked the door, and she pulled it open, the humid heat rushing in to mix with the artificial chill of the air conditioner. "Natalie, we need to go," she said, her voice tight. "I just saw a police cruiser turn down the main road. If your mother reported the car stolen." "She won't," I whispered, my voice trembling. "She can't call the police." I picked up the envelope and handed it to Dr. Kim. She took it, scanning the policy quickly. When she reached the handwritten note clipped to the back, she went deadly still. She read it twice. Then she looked at me, and for the first time, the calm, academic veneer cracked. She looked horrified. This is conspiracy to commit murder, she said, her voice barely audible. Natalie, this changes everything. We aren't going to the credit bureau. We are going to the precinct. Right now. She wanted me dead, I said, the tears finally coming, hot and stinging. She didn't just want my money. She wanted the payout. She is a dangerous sociopath, Dr. Kim said firmly, reaching over to squeeze my shoulder. And we have the evidence. This note, combined with the tax fraud and the identity theft, she's not just looking at fines anymore. She's looking at 20 years. She closed the passenger door and ran back to my Honda. I put the Camry in gear, my hands shaking so badly I could barely steer. I needed to get this car to the police station. I needed to be safe. My phone, which was connected to the car's Bluetooth, began to ring. The name flashed on the dashboard screen. Brandon. I stared at it. I should ignore it. I should drive. But a morbid curiosity took over. I needed to hear the fear in his voice. I needed to know if he was in on it too. I pressed the answer button on the steering wheel. Natalie. Brandon's voice filled the cabin, high-pitched and frantic. Natalie, listen to me. Don't hang up. You have the car, right? I have my car, I corrected him, my voice cold. And I have the life insurance policy, Brandon. Did you know she was planning to kill me? Or were you just waiting for your cut of the $500,000? There was a silence on the other end, followed by a sharp intake of breath. I didn't know about the note. Swear. I thought it was just an investment thing. But Natalie, you have to pull over. You can't take that car to the police. Watch me, I said, reaching to end the call. No, wait, he screamed. It's not about the insurance. It's the trunk. Mom made me put something in the trunk this morning before we left for graduation. She said she needed to get rid of it later. I slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt in the middle of the empty access road. What is in the trunk, Brandon? I demanded. His voice dropped to a terrified whisper. I don't know what it is exactly. But it's wrapped in plastic, it smells like chemicals, and she told me if anyone finds it, we're all going down for life. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered into the passenger footwell, Brandon's terrified breathing still audible through the speakers. I sat frozen in the middle of the deserted access road, the engine idling beneath me. Wrapped in plastic. Smells like chemicals. In the rearview mirror, I saw Dr. Kim pull up behind me in my Honda, her face pale through the windshield. She honked once, short and urgent, but I was already popping the trunk release. I needed to know. If I was going to the police, I needed to know if I was driving a car bomb or a mobile crime lab. I stepped out of the Camry, the humid air instantly sticking my shirt to my back. Dr. Kim scrambled out of my car, rushing to my side. Natalie, what are you doing? We need to keep moving. Brandon said there's something in the trunk, I said, my voice shaking. He said she told him to hide it this morning. He said if they find it, we go away for life. Dr. Kim gripped my arm. Don't touch it. Whatever it is, don't put your fingerprints on it. I walked to the rear of the car and lifted the trunk lid. The smell hit us instantly. A sharp, acrid stench of industrial cleaner and something sweeter, like almond extract. The trunk was empty except for a large black contractor bag taped shut in the corner. It looked innocent enough, like trash someone forgot to toss, but the smell coming off it was toxic. Stand back, Dr. Kim commanded. She used the sleeve of her robe to pull at the tape, peeling back the plastic. Inside there wasn't a body. It was a clear plastic storage bin filled with medical supplies. Vials of liquid with labels I recognized from my nursing friends. High-potency sedatives and opioids. A box of syringes. A pair of thick rubber gloves. And a bottle of bleach. But resting on top of the supplies was a spiral notebook. I reached for it before Dr. Kim could stop me. I flipped it open. It wasn't a ledger. It was practice. Page after page of handwriting. My handwriting. Or rather, my mother's attempt to copy it. She had traced signatures from my old high school yearbooks. She had practiced writing phrases like, "I can't take the pressure anymore," and "I'm sorry for being a burden." On the very last page, there was a finished draft. Suicide note. It was dated today. "She wasn't just going to kill me," I whispered, the horror hollowing out my stomach. "She was going to stage it. She was going to overdose me, bleach the scene, and leave this note. She planned to do it tonight. That's why she wanted me to come talk." Dr. Kim stared at the bin, her hand covering her mouth. "This is a murder kit. She had it in the car at your graduation." I looked at the vials. Enough to kill a horse. My mother had sat in the stands, laughing at me, knowing she had the means to end my life parked a few hundred yards away, just waiting for the right moment to cash in her policy. Suddenly, the silence of the access road was shattered. Wailing sirens. Blows. I looked up. Blue and red lights were flashing at the intersection ahead, blocking the only exit. 2 cruisers skidded to a halt, blocking us in. "Did you call them?" asked Dr. Kim, panic rising. "No," she said, her eyes widening as she looked past the police cars. Behind the cruisers, a familiar SUV pulled up. My mother stepped out, pointing a shaking finger at us, screaming something to the officers. "She reported the car stolen," Dr. Kim realized. "She's trying to flip the narrative before we can show them the trunk." The officers drew their weapons. "Hands!" one of them shouted, training his gun on me. "Step away from the vehicle. Now!" I raised my hands, my heart pounding in my ears. My mother stood behind the police line, a twisted look of victory on her face. She thought she had won. She thought she could get me arrested for theft, impound the car, and destroy the evidence before anyone looked inside. She didn't know I had the notebook in my hand. And she didn't know who was stepping out of the 3rd unmarked car that had just pulled up silently behind the police cruisers. The man who stepped out of the unmarked car wasn't a stranger. It was Agent Miller, the IRS investigator Dr. Kim had been coordinating with for the past 3 days. He held up a badge, his voice booming over the sirens. "Stand down. Federal agents." The local officers hesitated, lowering their weapons. My mother's triumphant scream died in her throat. She looked from the officers to Agent Miller, her face contorting in confusion. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, pointing at me. "She's the criminal. She stole my car. She's unstable." Agent Miller walked right past me, ignoring the Camry, and stopped in front of my mother. "Patricia Brooks." "Yes, thank God you're here. Arrest her." "We're not here for the car, ma'am," Miller said, his voice deadly calm. "We're here for the 4 counts of federal tax fraud. And based on what Detective Vance is finding in that trunk right now, I think we're adding conspiracy to commit murder to the list." My mother froze. She watched in horror as a detective from the passenger side of the unmarked car pulled the murder kit from the trunk. He held up the bag of syringes and the bleach. Then I walked forward, my hands still shaking, and handed Agent Miller the notebook. "She practiced," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "She practiced my suicide note. It's all in there." Patricia lunged for me, a feral, desperate sound tearing from her throat. "You ungrateful brat. I gave you life." 2 officers grabbed her, slamming her against the hood of the very car she had purchased to ruin me. As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, she didn't look at me with love or even regret. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated hate. "Brandon!" she screamed as they shoved her into the cruiser. "Brandon, tell them she's lying." But Brandon stood by the SUV, tears streaming down his face. He looked at me, then at the ground. "I told you, Mom," he whispered, loud enough for the officers to hear. "I told you I wouldn't go to jail for you." The silence that followed her departure was heavy, but for the first time in my life, it wasn't oppressive. It was the silence of a storm finally breaking. 3 weeks later, the air in Seattle was crisp and smelled of rain, a stark difference from the suffocating heat of San Diego. My apartment was small, but it was mine. No roommates, no couch surfing, and definitely no family. I was taping up the last box when my phone buzzed. "Voicemail." I stared at the screen. The number was from the county jail. Press play. Natalie, baby. My mother's voice was cracked, broken. I'm so sorry. I was just stressed. I didn't mean it. Please, tell them it was a misunderstanding. Can't do this. We're family. We need to talk. The old Natalie might have felt a twinge of guilt. The old Natalie might have wondered if she was being too harsh. But the woman standing in this apartment, the woman who had walked across that stage and survived, felt nothing but relief. I didn't reply. I didn't save it. Press delete. Dr. Kim was waiting downstairs in the moving truck. I grabbed my bag, took one last look at the empty room and walked out the door. Graduation hadn't just been about getting a degree. It was the day I learned that blood doesn't make you family. Loyalty does. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was free.